After the breakup of the Beatles, Apple Records continued on for a bit. But interestingly enough, there was one ex-Beatle who really wanted to keep producing his friends and artists that he liked. And that was George Harrison. So he created Dark Horse Records. And in addition to, of course, releasing his albums on Dark Horse, he released a lot of other artists. And there are three that particularly I want to draw your interest to. So, are you ready to take a ride on that Dark Horse? Okay, let's drop the needle. In 1974, as Apple Records was floundering, George wanted to start his own label, but he was a little concerned how to do it, so he reached out to his friend Leon Russell to ask for his advice, because Leon had, of course, started a record label called Shelter Records. Unfortunately, George himself was contractually bound to EMI Records to release his albums with EMI until 1976. But he didn't want to wait. He wanted to go ahead and create his own label, and so Dark Horse Records was born. George named the new label after his song Dark Horse, which was about himself in 1973. Dark Horse was initially distributed by A&M Records, but then when George's contract with EMI finally lapsed, Dark Horse and George's solo albums all moved over to Warner Brothers. Here is the label's logo. It is a seven-headed Indian horse that is big in Indian mythology. The very first Dark Horse release is its best non-George Harrison album in its history. It's called The Place I Love by a duo, Splinter. Splinter consisted of Bobby Purvis and Bill Elliott. They'd been discovered by Mal Evans when he was looking for talent for Apple Records, and Mal became their manager. George Harrison was producing his first feature film called Little Malcolm, and the film needed a song. Now, Mal Evans suggested a song written by Purvis and Elliott. George was impressed and invited the duo to record it at the new Apple Studios in London. George produced it and played slide guitar, and Pete Ham of Badfinger also appears on the session. But with the demise of Apple, Little Malcolm as a film never saw the light of day. But George was undeterred. He'd heard something in Splinter, so he signed them as his first act on Dark Horse Records. George told them to work on their vocal work, and the first album took over 17 months to complete. The album was largely recorded at George's personal studio on his estate at Friar Park. Besides George, Splinter was aided by Klaus Vormann on bass, Billy Preston on keyboard, Alvin Lee on guitar, and Jim Keltner on drums. The fact is, George was still under contract with Apple. So even though he plays guitar, bass, harmonium, mandolin, and many other instruments, he did it under fake names like Harry Georgeson, Jai Rai Harrison, and P. Reducer. The Place I Love was released in September 1974 with a serial number of 22001, meaning it's the first release of Dark Horse Records label. This is an amazing album. It's a blend of the Beatles, Badfinger, and something new. I really like the worldwide hit Coast to Fine Town. Another great song is Drink All Day, which was banned by the BBC for containing the word bloody. Oh my. China Light is another great song and was the second single in the US. And make sure to listen to Somebody's City. Critical reviews were great, and they focused on the songwriting, the harmonies, and George's production. Splinter followed this great album with their second album, Harder to Live, and George had minimal input on this record. And they recorded one more album for Dark Horse, two-man band. Splinter split up in 1984, but there is an official website, www.splinterlegacy.com. A new acoustic album, which was to be called Never Went Back, was planned, but Splinter never hit the heights of their first album. If this was the only record that Splinter had ever recorded, it would still stand the test of time. And it was a terrific launch for Dark Horse Records. The second album to be released on Dark Horse Records features George's friend, Ravi Shankar. George had decided he wanted to produce an album with Ravi. It's called Shankar Friends, and it was the second album to come out on Dark Horse Records immediately following The Place I Love by Splinter. Family and Friends is just that. Shankar's son and sister-in-law play on it, along with many of Ravi's friends from India and from the West. The first track is I Am Missing You, where the band includes Harrison, Nicky Hopkins, Clarence Foreman, Billy Preston, and others. George arranged it, and it's very much in the style of Phil Spector. The album could only hit 176 in the US, and it didn't even chart in the UK. The third Dark Horse artist we'll talk about is Henry McCullough. The album is Mind Your Own Business and was released in 1975. Henry was briefly in a band called Heir Apparent, which you might recall from an earlier episode when I talk about the Jimi Hendrix concert that I went to see that also included Heir Apparent. After leaving Heir Apparent, Harry became part of the Grease Band and played behind Joe Cocker at Woodstock. In 1971, Henry joined Paul and Linda McCartney alongside Denny Lane and Denny Sewell as Wings, and they recorded Hi 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 and My Love before he left the group after 2 years and right before they recorded the terrific Band on the Run. After Henry left Wings, he flew right over to George Harrison and recorded this record for Dark Horse. Naturally, Dark Horse Records focused on George Harrison albums, and they released 8 of them, the first one being 33 1/3, and the last one, George's last album, Brainwashed. So out of the wreckage of Apple Records, it's interesting that George decided to create a label so that he continued to produce his friends and fellow artists. And it's interesting that he named it Dark Horse, because George Harrison certainly was. Thanks for watching. Keep it rockin'. If you liked this episode, hit the like button, and you can also leave me a comment down below, and I'll respond to you. If you subscribe, we'll let you know when future episodes come out.